Jesus added, "A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to their father, 'Give me the share of the estate that is coming to me.' So the father divided up the property between them. Some days later, the younger son gathered up his belongings and went off to a distant land. Here he squandered all his money on loose living. After everything was spent, a great famine broke out in the land, and the son was in great need. So he went to a landowner who sent him to a farm to take care of the pigs. The son was so hungry that he could have eaten the husks that were fodder for the pigs, but no one made a move to give him anything. Coming to his senses at last, he said, 'How many hired hands at my father's house have more than enough to eat? Well, here I am starving. I'll quit and go back home and say, I've sinned against God and against you. I no longer deserve to be called one of your children. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' With that, the younger son set off for home. While still a long way off, the father caught sight of the returning child and was deeply moved. The father ran out to meet him, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'I've sinned against God and against you. I no longer deserve to be called one of your children.' But his father said to one of the workers, 'Quick, bring out the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet. Take the calf we've been fattening and butcher it. Let's eat and celebrate. This son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and now he's found.' And the celebration began. Meanwhile, the elder son had been out in the field. As he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the workers and asked what was happening. The worker answered, 'Your brother is home, and the fatted calf has been killed because your father has him back safe and sound.' The son got angry at this and refused to go into the party. But his father came out and pleaded with him. The older son replied, 'Look, for years now, I've done every single thing you asked me to do. I never disobeyed even one of your orders, yet you never gave me so much as a kid goat to celebrate with my friends. But then this son of yours comes home after going through your money with prostitutes, and you kill the fatted calf for him.' 'But my child,' the father said, 'you are with me always, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and rejoice. This brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and now he's found.' La palabra de Dios. Gracias a Dios." It is such a gift and a small miracle to be here with you today in person. I am really, really grateful to Mark and Isaiah and Jude, who aren't feeling good but still sent me off here. I was so excited to bring them to you and for you to meet Jude in person and everything, but it's amazing because probably one of my last memories in this room was I was pregnant with Jude, and I received a blessing from you all as we were headed off to Washington. And so it just feels really like a gift to be here in person. And every day, I live in East Wenatchee now, I look out my window and I see the immense and majestic Columbia River. I've often imagined how these waters that move near my home find their way to you here just north of Portland. The water tells me that despite the distance, we are connected. Despite the distance, we are community. And from the first COVID Zoom services in the spring of 2020 to many one-to-one conversations I've had with you over the phone and the Make the Road by Walking book group that I was able to join in person for the first time this morning, I found my relationship with you all to be a lifeline as I make my way in new places. For 2 years on Lopez Island, and now in this past year in the Wenatchee Valley. As I go about my life in new places, I think of you. When I was on Lopez and I saw a congregation's inability to discuss the reality of systemic racism in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, when I learned about the staggering COVID-19 disparities between Latinx and white residents of Wenatchee, when I hear about a few progressive church communities feeling exhausted by their ministry and struggling to connect with the broader community, I find myself wondering, how would Salt and Light respond in this situation? What would Leaven do? I literally ask myself that all the time. There are many times when I would be listening via Zoom on a Sunday morning and hear what you all are doing here, and that gave me an idea to dream up something small to do where I was. I'm sorry, I'm so emotional about this, gosh. It led to small but beautiful things like starting faith and race conversations at the Lutheran Church of the San Juans, or now co-leading a listening season in Wenatchee around the intersection of anti-racism and spirituality. Your way of being church, weaving relationships, storytelling, and community organizing with the life of Jesus has profoundly changed me and reignited my hope in the gospel. I cannot imagine getting through the last few years without this spiritual encouragement and inspiration from this community. And here before you today, I come to share an even further way that you have been a lifeline. The call that I have felt since I was a child, a call to connect worship, to work for justice, a call to preaching and pastoral care, a call to service, has been nurtured here and germinated. Since joining Salt and Light in 2018, I've held the question of becoming a minister of word and sacrament in my heart. In conversations with many of you, with Pastor Melissa, Pastor Solveig, with the Congregational Mission and Leadership Team, if that's how I say it, CMLT, with Mark and Isaiah and Jude, with friends I'm making in Washington through Wenatchee for Immigrant Justice and Faith Action Network. All of these conversations with all of you, I have decided to submit my application to the Oregon Synod to be considered a candidate for rostered ministry with the ELCA. Yeah. Thank you. This is not a decision I take lightly, and it's not a process that I would want to start unless it was part of this community. And believe me, I'm living somewhere else, and they literally said, "Oh, come do this, come do it with us. We have a candidacy committee." And I said, I want to do it with my spiritual home. I want to do it with the people who are showing me how to be salt and light. That might come back at me down the line, but I don't care. I don't care. I'm not sure if I'm quoting Cheryl or Jane here, but I keep thinking of wisdom that was shared recently. Life will grow when the conditions are right. When the conditions are right. A call that I have felt for nearly 30 years finally has the right conditions. The trust I have in you and how you are church, the trust I have in the Oregon Synod's leadership, and the need I see for more communities like Salt and Light, Leaven in the Pacific Northwest has helped me come to a place where I'm willing to take the risk and offer myself as a candidate for word and sacrament. Now, given that Isaiah and Jude are still young, This is a process that will probably take several more years. I've got to take some Lutheran classes. I had plenty of Catholic classes. I'll need to do some clinical pastoral education units, an internship, but I feel the conditions are right. I feel connected with you all through the Columbia River, and it's time to take this step. As some of you know, my journey began many years ago. I grew up in a large Roman Catholic family in Billings, Montana. I was oldest of 5 children with 4 younger brothers. And we were surrounded by a large, extended Irish Catholic family. We went to Catholic schools, and our world was intimately connected with the church. Well, when I entered the 4th grade in 1993, the Bishop of Eastern Montana made a big announcement. He opened up altar serving to girls. Mike Hogan, I'm looking at you. Fellow former altar server. Yeah, I was thrilled. Somehow, I got to be the first female altar server at St. Patrick's Co-Cathedral. I even got interviewed in the local newspaper. My picture was taken. Before this weekend, I said, Dad, you gotta find that newspaper article. I wanna see what I said to the reporter. I remember being so nervous and excited as I put on the sleek black robe and white cassock. I loved having an active role to play in the Mass and being so physically close to the bread and the wine. As I processed in with the cross or helped wash the priest's hands before the communion rite, I felt this deep sense of meaning and leadership and closeness to God. As a Catholic child, I understood this excitement within me was a call to the priesthood, to devote my life to celebrating the sacraments, preaching, serving the community, and it was so perplexing to me. I felt the call was so strong, but the church wasn't ordaining women. As high school arrived, I became more involved with service learning. My favorite teacher, Mr. Lenneman, explained that the service we did in the community was closely connected to communion. As God prepared a table for us, we could prepare tables for others and make sure that no one went hungry. As I began to see this connection between the sacraments and service everywhere, I felt like I discovered a beautiful fire. I knew that only men were priests, but I couldn't shade the excitement I felt around doing something like that with my life. I brought the question to my parents. They encouraged me and explained that they disagreed with the teaching, and they thought the women could do a good job in the role too. With a keen sense of justice, I began to bring my question to any priest, religion teacher, nun, and even one bishop who would talk with me. Some encouraged me to think about becoming a nun, and others, like Father John Houlihan, said, I don't think it will change in my lifetime, but maybe in yours. It wasn't much encouragement, but maybe it was a glimmer of hope or a crack in the system, I don't know. The call I felt was so strong, and I thought maybe I could change things. I was young. For the next 20 years, I saw my call as working for reform within the Catholic Church. I went to divinity school, pushed myself to the limits of trying to be the change, demonstrating with my life and my actions how capable women were in leading faith communities. While serving at St. Ignatius in Portland as a pastoral associate, I devoted myself to building relationships with adults, preparing for sacraments, and to our social justice ministry. I tried to be as inclusive as possible, but there were so many limits. Rules about when or where that I, a laywoman, could speak during Mass. What you would call it, it's a reflection, it's not preaching. Rules about divorce that prevented many people, like my brother Daniel, from being married in the church, and even having his daughter baptized until his first marriage had an annulment. And the complete omission of people like my cousin Travis from celebrating their marriage in the church because they were gay. Up close and personal, I saw the table that had once been a source of inspiration for me was now a symbol of exclusion. In my 4th year as a pastoral associate, I reached a breaking point as I grappled with the dissonance between this unconditional love of God on the one hand and exclusion around the sacraments on the other. My mental health was deteriorating. At the same time, I was finding new life as I connected with people like Pastor Melissa and folks from other faith traditions through the interfaith movement for immigrant justice. Seeing their communities work for systemic change helped me to come to terms with the painful reality that the Roman Catholic institution had a unique ability to prevent lay and clergy from organizing and making change. It didn't want to reform and integrate the voices of all the people. It wanted to preserve itself. And early on, I had promised myself that I would not let ministry and the Catholic Church break me to the point of losing trust in myself and my hope in the gospel. In the late winter of 2017, Mark and I knew it was coming pretty close, and I prepared to leave formal ministry in the Catholic Church. As I started to develop relationships with you all through intercambio and Cully organizing, my theological and ecclesial imagination was beginning to expand. The call just got bigger. Communion just got bigger. I truly felt like I was undergoing a spiritual rebirth as I saw some of my favorite aspects of ministry and social justice in a new light. I remember one wondering time in particular that really solidified my decision. Melissa spread the quilt out and then had the children step on and off the blanket. If you have glasses, you can come to the blanket. If you are a boy, you can come to the blanket. If you have a red shirt, you can come to the blanket. As the activity came to a close, she then invited all of the kids back onto the blanket and connected the quilt to the communion table. She said something I will never forget. She said, "Remember, kids, everyone is welcome at God's table. If not everyone is welcome, then it's just somebody else's table." Growing up within a tradition that did not welcome everyone to receive from the table or even serve at the table, this was a profoundly liberating message. And it also made me a bit indignant. What table had I been at for the past 30 years? How could I have gone so long, studied so diligently, and been with so many Christians to only now have finally found God's table? What? That morning, I was just like the children, learning with them that the unconditional love and welcome of God that we proclaim in faith must be the same unconditional love and welcome we practice as community. Period. And so in our gospel scene today, we hear a famous parable, and one of 3 parables about losing and finding that Jesus shares in Luke's gospel. And it's often referred to as the prodigal son, a heading that suggests that the focus is on the son who squanders his inheritance and comes back to life, comes back begging for forgiveness. And although I definitely feel like a great welcome home here, my entry point into this story is a little bit different today. The heart of this parable that I see and that especially came through in our book group conversation is not really about either of the sons, but it's about this loving parent who forgets to count, who is filled with compassion, who extravagantly welcomes the lost younger child, and who pleads with the older child to come celebrate his brother's return. This loving parent says, we must celebrate and rejoice, welcoming both the lost and the righteous to the celebration. This passage in Luke is featured in the last chapter of We Make the Road by Walking, and the author, Brian McLaren, shares a twist on this story that I hadn't yet encountered. He says, if we enter this story and let it work on us, we can look out from within it and see ourselves and all creation held in the parental love of God. We can empathize with God, who wants all to come, all to enjoy the feast, all to discover or rediscover their true identity in God's family, in God's love. In this way, McLaren is sharing the parable more than a story from Jesus' ministry, but as a symbol of the fullness of the kingdom of God, a future of welcome and inclusion, where all creation is being drawn towards God's love. And in the book group this morning, some of the things that I want to lift up that were shared was just how we are being invited by the Spirit to bring our wounds, to bring our full self. And in this communion, the invitational nature of creation of God is reflected for all of us. And we live in a world where so many people are not invited. So many tables do not welcome everyone. And it's also okay to name the tension of these two brothers and what happened and what transpired, and how do we not get caught up again in kind of, even if we offer forgiveness, what if a person leaves? All of that is true. And one of the things that we settled upon is that this parent's invitation to the meal opens up the possibility that things could be different. There could be conversation at the meal. There could be new possibilities. So all of this is to say, you have shown me what it looks like to foster community where everyone is welcome at God's table, and how critical community organizing is in addressing the inequities that persist. So what I would like to do now is just take some time where we can open up and hear the wisdom of those gathered here, what spoke to your heart and your life. Maybe it is something related to the story of the sons and the father, or I'd like to offer a question for us as well. And one reflection question to consider is just, when have you experienced being welcome to the table? An invitation of your full self. What did that feel like? So we'll take the next 10 minutes to share with one another.